black waitress defended old woman being mocked for worn clothes, unaware she was the CEO's mother. The lunch rush at Harlow's was in full swing, tables packed, orders flying, the kind of controlled chaos that only the best restaurant staff could make look effortless. And right in the middle of it all, Zara. Moving between tables with the quiet precision of someone who had learned long ago that the best service was invisible. She was refilling a water glass at table 7 when she heard it. A laugh. Not the warm, easy laughter of people enjoying a good meal. Something sharper than that. Something designed to carry. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. Is she actually sitting here? In that?
The voice came from table 4. Loud, polished, the kind of voice that had never once worried about being too much. Is she actually sitting here? In that? Zara looked up. At the corner table, a small elderly woman sat alone. White hair, soft eyes, a pale blue cardigan that had seen better decades, a worn leather handbag resting on the seat beside her. She was studying the menu with quiet concentration, completely unbothered. 3 tables away, Diana Mercer, fur coat, designer bag, fresh blowout, was leaning toward her 2 friends with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "This isn't a soup kitchen, darling," Diana said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Someone should tell her." Her friends laughed. The elderly woman's eyes didn't move from the menu, but Zara's did. She set the water pitcher down slowly, straightened up, and in that moment, before she took a single step, she made a decision that was about to change every life in that room, including her own. What nobody in Harlow's knew that afternoon, not Diana, not her friends, not even Zara herself, was that the old woman in the worn blue cardigan was the reason this restaurant existed at all. Stay right there. Because what happens in the next 30 minutes inside this restaurant will cost one woman everything she spent years trying to build. Where are you watching from tonight? I would like to connect with you better. Take a moment to like and click the subscribe button. To understand what happened inside Harlow's that afternoon, you need to understand 3 things. Who Zara was, who Diana Mercer was, and who the old woman in the blue cardigan really was. Because this was never just a lunch. This was 3 entirely different lives, built in completely different worlds, arriving at the same corner of the same room on the same Tuesday afternoon. And only one of them was ready for what was coming. Harlow's sat on the corner of Madison and 47th in Midtown Manhattan. From the outside, it looked like 100 other upscale New York restaurants. Dark wood facade, brass lettering above the door, a small chalkboard menu in the window that changed weekly. The kind of place that didn't need to advertise because its reputation walked ahead of it. Reservations were recommended. The food was extraordinary. The service was, by every review, every whispered recommendation, every returning guest, immaculate. What almost nobody knew, not the food critics, not the regulars, not even most of the staff, was who actually owned it. The name on the business registration was a holding company, clean, anonymous. The way truly wealthy people preferred their leisure investments, profitable, prestigious, and private. The restaurant had been a gift, in the truest sense of the word, built not for profit but for love. But that part of the story would come later. For now, the people. Zara Collins was 31 years old, and she had been working at Harlow's for 3 years. She had grown up in Baltimore, middle child of 5. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility for 20 years without a single complaint that Zara ever heard. Her father drove a city bus, early mornings, late nights, and still made it to every school play, every parent-teacher meeting, every moment that mattered. They were not wealthy, but they were, in every way that counted, rich. Zara had inherited her mother's back, straight, unbending, the posture of someone who carried weight without showing it. And her father's eyes, warm, watchful, the kind that noticed everything and judged slowly. She had studied hospitality management at Morgan State University, graduated with honors, and arrived in New York at 26 with a single suitcase, a carefully saved deposit, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She had worked her way through 2 other restaurants before Harlow's. Good places. Professional places. But the moment she walked into Harlow's for her interview 3 years ago, The light, the energy, the quiet standard that ran through every corner of the operation like a current, she had known. This was home. She was not just a waitress here, she was, in the quiet language of people who understood service, a guardian of the room. The floor manager trusted her with the difficult tables, the demanding guests, the moments that required both grace and steel. She handled them all the same way, with warmth that never became weakness, and with a firmness that never became cold. She loved this job. And she loved, above everything, the version of herself it required her to be. Diana Mercer had arrived at Harlow's at 12:45 with 2 friends and an agenda. She was 43, founder of a mid-sized luxury lifestyle brand, Mercer & Co., that had spent the last decade establishing itself as a serious name in the high-end market. The clothes, the accessories, the carefully curated image of tasteful, aspirational wealth. It was doing well. But doing well for Diana had never been enough. She wanted a partner, a real one, the kind of partnership that would take Mercer & Co. from a respected name to an untouchable one. And for the past 4 months, she had had her eye on one man, Nathan Cole, CEO of Cole Enterprises, a quietly vast private holding company with interests in real estate, hospitality, and luxury retail across 11 states. The kind of company that other companies wanted to be associated with simply for the weight the name carried. Nathan Cole did not do many partnerships, but when he did, the companies he chose were never the same afterward. Diana had been trying to get a meeting with Nathan Cole for 4 months. 4 months of emails that received polite, non-committal responses from his office. 2 phone calls that went to his assistant. 1 industry event where she had positioned herself across the room from him for 40 minutes before he left early. He was, by every account, private, deliberate, not unfriendly, but deeply selective about who he gave his time to. Diana had not gotten where she was by giving up. So when her friend Priya had suggested Harlow's for lunch today, impossible to get a reservation but I know someone, Diana had agreed without much thought. She needed a good meal and good company, and a break from the frustration of chasing a man who didn't seem to know she existed. She had not come today with any particular purpose beyond that, or so she thought. The elderly woman at the corner table had arrived before the lunch rush. She had walked in quietly, without a reservation, and asked the host at the door, very politely, whether there might be a small table available. She was alone. She wouldn't be long. She just wanted a quiet lunch. The host had hesitated. Tables at Harlow's were fully booked most days, and then Zara, passing by with a tray, had caught the exchange, had looked at the old woman, at her soft eyes, her pale blue cardigan, the worn leather handbag that she held with the particular care of someone for whom it held meaning beyond its material value. "Table 6 is open," Zara had said quietly to the host. "Seat her there." The host had nodded. The old woman had smiled at Zara, small, warm, genuine. "Thank you, dear," she had said. "Of course," Zara had replied. "Welcome to Harlow's." She hadn't thought anything more of it. She had simply done what felt right. She always did. And that was the thing about Zara Collins that people always underestimated. She didn't do the right thing because she expected a reward. She didn't help people because she was calculating the return. She helped because somewhere between her mother's straight back and her father's watchful eyes, she had absorbed a truth so deep it had become instinct. Every person who walks through a door deserves to feel like they belong there. No exceptions. Not even, especially not, the ones the rest of the room had already decided didn't. Diana Mercer's laugh cut across the restaurant for the second time. Zara heard it from the service station, set down the tray she was carrying, and began to walk toward table 4. Zara had learned, in 3 years of working the floor at Harlow's, that there were 2 kinds of difficult guests. The first kind were difficult because they were having a bad day. Stressed, tired, running on empty, and taking it out on the nearest available target. These ones were manageable. A little patience, a little warmth, and most of them softened within minutes. By the time they left, half of them apologized without being asked. The second kind were difficult because they enjoyed it. One look at Diana Mercer's table, and Zara knew exactly which kind she was dealing with. Diana was holding court. leaning back in her chair with the relaxed authority of a woman who had never once questioned her right to take up space, in a room, in a conversation, in the world. Her fur coat was draped over the back of her chair. Her designer bag sat on the table beside her bread plate like a third guest. Her two friends, both polished, both carefully dressed, both laughing at precisely the right moments, orbited her with the practiced ease of people who had learned long ago that staying in Diana's light required staying in Diana's rhythm. I mean, honestly? Diana was saying, tilting her head in the direction of the corner table where Margaret sat alone. Her voice was not quiet. It was not trying to be. Who let her in? Look at that cardigan. Look at that bag. This is a Michelin-recommended restaurant, not a thrift store waiting room. Priya laughed, though her eyes moved briefly toward the corner and then away. Claudia said nothing, just refilled her water glass and studied the menu a little too carefully. Margaret had not looked up. She sat with the same quiet, unhurried stillness she had carried since she walked through the door, studying the menu, hands folded, completely unbothered. The kind of stillness that only comes from a lifetime of knowing exactly who you are. And somehow, that stillness seemed to irritate Diana more than any reaction could have. Somebody should tell her. Diana continued, louder now, performing for her table. There's a dress code here, darling. You can't just wander in off the street looking like... Excuse me. The words came out before Zara had fully decided to say them. She had been passing Diana's table with a tray of water glasses, her route back to the service station, and she had stopped. Just stopped. Tray in hand. Standing at the edge of Diana's table with an expression that was still professional, still composed, but carrying something underneath it that had not been there 30 seconds ago. Diana looked up slowly, the kind of slow that communicated she was not accustomed to being interrupted. Yes? I couldn't help overhearing. Zara said, keeping her voice level and clear, and I want to make sure every guest in this restaurant feels comfortable, including the lady at table 6. Diana blinked, then smiled, the smile of someone reaching for a weapon they had used before and found reliable. I'm sure she's fine, Diana said dismissively, waving a hand. I was just making an observation, among friends. With respect, ma'am, Zara said. Observations like that, in a room this size, aren't really private, and the lady at table 6 is our guest. She deserves the same experience everyone else here came for. The table went quiet. Priya looked at her plate. Diana's smile held, but something behind it had shifted, recalibrated. Are you seriously lecturing me right now? She said. Her voice had dropped, not softer but lower. The register of someone deciding to stop being charming. Do you know who I am? I know you're a guest at Harlow's, Zara said evenly. And so is she. That's what matters here. Diana stared at her for a long, measuring moment. Then she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. I'd like to speak to your manager, she said. Greg Paulson had been the floor manager at Harlow's for 6 years. He was efficient. He was professional. He was, above all things, committed to one operating principle that he had repeated to his staff so many times it had become something close to scripture. The guest is always right. He appeared from the back office in under 2 minutes. Pressed shirt, name badge, the practiced calm of a man who had handled 1,000 complaints and intended to handle 1,000 more. He arrived at Diana's table with a smile already in place. Good afternoon. I'm Greg, the floor manager. I understand there's been a concern? Your waitress, Diana said, gesturing toward Zara with 2 fingers, just spoke to me in a completely unacceptable way. In front of my guests, I came here for a pleasant lunch, not to be lectured by the help. Greg turned to Zara. Zara met his eyes steadily and said nothing. Greg looked back at Diana, at her fur coat, her designer bag, the particular way she held herself, the posture of someone accustomed to complaints resolving in her favor. He made a calculation. The wrong one. I sincerely apologize, ma'am, he said, turning fully away from Zara. That is absolutely not the standard of service we hold at Harlow's. I assure you this will be addressed immediately. He turned to Zara, and in front of Diana's table, in front of the surrounding guests who had been watching the entire exchange, he said, quietly, but not quietly enough. Zara, you can clock out. We'll talk when your shift ends. The room absorbed this in silence. Zara looked at Greg for one long moment, Then she set her tray down on the service station beside her, removed her apron, folded it neatly over the counter edge. She did not argue, did not raise her voice, did not give Diana Mercer the satisfaction of a single crack in her composure. She simply nodded once, to Greg, to the room, to no one in particular, picked up her bag from behind the counter, and walked toward the exit with her spine straight and her chin level. The way her mother had always walked. Diana watched her go with the satisfied expression of a woman who had gotten exactly what she came for. "Thank you," she said to Greg, already reaching for her menu. "Now, I believe we were about to order." But not everyone in the room had watched Zara leave with satisfaction. At the corner table, Margaret had finally set her menu down. She was watching the door through which Zara had just disappeared, and the expression on her face was not the soft, unbothered calm it had held all afternoon. It was something else entirely. Still quiet, still composed, but with an edge beneath it now. The particular, patient edge of a woman who had seen something she would not be forgetting. She reached into her worn leather handbag, produced a phone that was considerably newer than anything else about her appearance, and dialed. At the small private table near the back of the restaurant, the one always reserved, always held, always available, a phone buzzed once on a white tablecloth. Nathan Cole looked down at the screen, saw his mother's name, and answered immediately. "Mom? Everything okay?" The voice that came back was calm, unhurried, the voice of a woman who had never once needed volume to command attention. "I'm at the restaurant, Nathan," Margaret said softly. "I know, I'm in the back. I was going to come say hello after my—" "There's a young woman," Margaret said, cutting through gently. "A waitress. She just lost her job for defending me." Silence. "Say that again," Nathan said. Margaret said it again. All of it. Quietly. Precisely. The way she had always told stories, every detail in its right place, nothing wasted, nothing exaggerated. When she finished, the line was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then Nathan Cole stood up from his private table, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the dining room with the unhurried, deliberate calm of a man who had made a decision and intended to see it through completely. Greg Paulson was still at Diana's table, laughing now, charmed, the relief of a man who believed the crisis had passed, when he looked up and saw his employer walking toward him. And every single thing in his expression changed. There are moments in a room when everything shifts. Not loudly, not with announcement, just a change in the air. The way a room full of people somehow simultaneously becomes aware that something is happening that is larger than the ordinary business of the afternoon. Conversations drop half a register. Forks pause between plate and mouth. Eyes move without meaning to. That was what happened when Nathan Cole walked out of the back of Harlow's and into the dining room. He was 44 years old, tall, dark suit, not flashy, not loud, the kind of suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but gave nothing away about that fact. Close-cut hair, slightly graying at the sides. The kind of face that was difficult to read, not because it was cold, but because it was controlled. The face of a man who had learned early that a readable face was a negotiable face. He walked without urgency, without theater, but every member of staff who saw him enter the dining room went very still. Because Nathan Cole did not come out of the back during service. Not ever. Greg Paulson saw him first. He was mid-sentence, something charming, something designed to cement Diana's goodwill, when his peripheral vision caught the figure moving through the dining room, and his brain completed the recognition before his eyes fully confirmed it. His sentence stopped. Just stopped. Mid-word, like a record pulled from a turntable. Diana noticed the interruption. Followed Greg's gaze across the room, saw a tall man in a dark suit walking toward them with the calm, purposeful stride of someone who owned the floor beneath his feet. Which, of course, he did. "Mr. Cole," Greg started, rising slightly from where he had been leaning against the table. I didn't know you were on the floor today, sir. Sit down, Greg," Nathan said quietly. Greg sat, not in a chair. He wasn't near a chair, he just reduced, shrank back from his half-lean against the table and stood with his hands at his sides like a man trying to occupy as little space as possible. Nathan stopped at the edge of Diana's table. He looked at Diana, at her friends, at the fur coat on the back of the chair and the designer bag on the tablecloth. Then he looked at Greg, Tell me what happened, he said, simply, directly. The tone of a man asking for information, not for performance. Greg opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. There was a guest concern, sir. One of our servers was, she spoke to a guest in a way that didn't meet our service standard, so I made the decision to... You sent Zara home, Nathan said. It wasn't a question. Greg's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, sir. During service? Yes. In front of guests. A pause. Yes, sir. Nathan nodded slowly, the nod of a man filing information carefully away. He turned to Diana. Diana Mercer had not built a successful company by being easily rattled. She had sat across from difficult men in difficult rooms and held her ground through sheer force of prepared confidence. She was good at this. She knew she was good at this. But there was something about the way Nathan Cole looked at her. Not with anger, not with accusation, just with that quiet, total attention that made the confidence feel slightly less solid than it had 60 seconds ago. She recovered quickly. I'm sorry. Are you the owner? She asked, her voice finding its register of pleasant authority. I am, Nathan said. Good, Diana said, sitting forward slightly. Because I think you should know that one of your staff members spoke to me in a completely inappropriate... I know what happened at this table, Nathan said. Diana paused. My mother, Nathan continued, called me 4 minutes ago. She was sitting at table 6. The sentence landed in the space between them like something heavy and irreversible. Diana blinked. I'm sorry? The woman your table has been commenting on since you arrived, Nathan said, his voice remaining completely, almost unnervingly calm. The one in the blue cardigan, that is my mother, Margaret Cole. The color moved in Diana's face, not all at once but in stages, like a tide going out. Priya made a small involuntary sound beside her. Claudia put her water glass down very carefully. I wasn't. Diana started. I didn't know. No, Nathan agreed. You didn't. He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. But I want to make sure I understand the sequence of events correctly, he continued. My mother came in for lunch. Your table made comments about her appearance, loudly enough for surrounding guests to hear. One of my best servers stepped in to defend her. And my floor manager, rather than address the behavior that created the problem, sent that server home. He looked at Greg when he said the last sentence. Greg said nothing. There was nothing to say. The dining room had gone very quiet. Not the performative quiet of people pretending not to listen. The genuine quiet of people who had stopped pretending entirely and were simply watching. A couple at the next table had set their cutlery down. A group of 4 near the window had turned, almost imperceptibly, in their chairs. Diana's hand moved to her water glass. Stopped without picking it up. Mr. Cole, she said. And her voice, for the first time since she had walked into Harlow's, had lost its performance quality. What remained beneath it was something more careful, more calculating. I want to apologize sincerely, if I had known. If you had known, Nathan said, that the woman you were mocking was my mother, you wouldn't have done it. Diana nodded. Exactly, I would never. That's what concerns me, Nathan said. Diana stopped. The reason it was wrong, Nathan continued quietly, had nothing to do with who she is. It was wrong because she is a person, sitting alone, having lunch, bothering no one. He looked at Diana with those controlled, unreadable eyes. The clothes she was wearing today belonged to my father. He passed away 11 years ago. She wears that cardigan because it still smells like him, or at least she believes it does. And that bag was the first gift he ever gave her. She has carried it every day for 40 years. The table was absolutely silent. Priya's eyes had filled. Claudia was looking at the tablecloth. Diana sat very still, and whatever she had been planning to say next had clearly left her entirely. Nathan straightened, looked at Greg. Call Zara, he said. Tell her to come back. Full shift pay for today regardless. Greg nodded rapidly. Yes, sir, of course, sir. And Greg looked up. We'll talk. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. The way he said it made clear that the conversation would not be pleasant. Greg nodded again, said nothing. Moved quickly toward the back office with his phone already in his hand. Nathan turned back to Diana's table one last time. He did not raise his voice, did not perform for the room. Simply looked at Diana Mercer with the clear, final expression of a man who had said what needed saying and was now closing a door. I'm going to ask you and your guests to settle your bill and end your lunch here today, he said. You're welcome to finish what's on the table, but I won't be able to accommodate you further. Diana stared at him. You're asking us to leave? I am, Nathan said simply. Do you have any idea? Diana said. And now something was rising in her voice, the last defense of a woman who had run out of better options. Who you're talking to? I am Diana Mercer. Mercer & Co., I have been trying to arrange a meeting with you for 4 months. 4 months, Mr. Cole. The partnership I'm proposing is worth. I know who you are, Miss Mercer, Nathan said. Diana stopped. My office received your emails, he said. All of them. A beat. I think you now understand why that meeting won't be happening. He didn't wait for a response. He turned from the table and walked, unhurried, deliberate, the same calm stride that had brought him into the room, toward the corner table where his mother sat. Margaret looked up as he approached, and the expression on her face, the one she had held through everything, through Diana's comments and Zara's defense, and Greg's decision and all of it, finally, completely softened. You didn't have to come out, she said. Yes, I did, Nathan said simply, pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. Margaret looked at him for a moment, then reached across the table and patted his hand once, the way mothers do when words would only be less than the feeling. The young woman, Margaret said. Zara. She's coming back, Nathan said. Margaret nodded. Good. A pause. She's remarkable, Nathan. Nathan looked toward the entrance, toward the door through which Zara had walked 20 minutes ago with her apron folded and her spine straight. I know, he said quietly. At Diana's table, no one spoke. Priya was looking at her lap. Claudia had pushed her plate away. Diana sat with her hands flat on the white tablecloth, staring at the space where Nathan Cole had been standing, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she had absolutely nothing to say. The fur coat on the back of her chair suddenly felt very heavy. The designer bag on the tablecloth suddenly looked very loud. And somewhere between the silence and the weight of what had just happened in this room, Diana Mercer began, slowly, privately, and far too late, to understand the difference between the price of a thing and its value. The front door of Harlow's opened, and Zara walked back in. She walked back through that door with everything still intact, her dignity, her spine, her character. But what Nathan Cole and Margaret are about to do next, nobody saw coming. Not Zara, not the room, not even Diana. Stay with me. The room felt it before anyone acknowledged it. That particular shift in atmosphere that happens when something has been broken and something else, something better, something more honest, is trying to fill the space it left behind. The dining room at Harlow's had returned to a version of its usual lunch service hum, forks moving, glasses lifting, quiet conversation resuming. But underneath all of it ran a current that hadn't been there an hour ago. Everyone in the room had seen what happened. And everyone in the room was waiting, in the way people wait when a story isn't finished, to see how it ended. Zara stood just inside the entrance. She had her bag over one shoulder and her coat still on. She hadn't been gone long enough to go far. Greg's call had reached her on the sidewalk outside, half a block from the restaurant, standing in the November cold trying to decide whether she felt more like crying or walking until she couldn't feel her legs. She had answered on the second ring. Greg's voice had been different on the phone, smaller, stripped of the managerial authority it had carried 40 minutes ago when he sent her home in front of a dining room full of people. Mr. Cole has asked that you come back, he had said. Full pay for the shift. He'd like to speak with you. Zara had stood on that sidewalk for a long moment. Then she had turned around. Now she stood at the entrance to the dining room and took it in. The room she had worked in for 3 years, that she knew table by table, guest by guest, the way a person knows a place they have genuinely loved. She saw Greg standing near the back office door, not meeting her eyes. She saw the couple at table 3 who gave her a small, quiet nod when her gaze passed over them. She saw Diana's table. Diana and her friends sitting in a silence that had settled over them like weather. The plates in front of them barely touched. And she saw the corner table, where Margaret sat, and across from Margaret, a man Zara had never seen come out of the back during service in 3 years of working this floor. Nathan Cole looked up from the corner table and met her eyes across the room. He stood. Zara crossed the dining room slowly. Not performing, not hurrying, just moving the way she always moved through this space, with the quiet ease of someone at home in it. She stopped at the corner table. Looked at Margaret first, because Margaret was who this had all started with, and that felt right. Margaret was looking at her with those warm, deep eyes, and the expression in them was something Zara felt in her chest before she could name it. "Sit down, dear," Margaret said softly. "Please." Zara looked briefly at Nathan. He gestured to the chair beside his mother with a quiet nod. She sat. For a moment, nobody spoke. The sounds of the restaurant moved around them, the soft percussion of a working kitchen, the low music of other people's conversations, and in the middle of it all, this small corner table held its own particular quiet. "My name is Margaret Cole," the old woman said, "and this is my son, Nathan." Zara looked at Nathan. Then back at Margaret. "He owns this restaurant," Margaret continued. "He built it for me, actually. 10 years ago, when his father passed." She paused, smoothed the sleeve of her blue cardigan with one hand. James loved good food, good rooms, the kind of places where people came in as strangers and left feeling like something had been given back to them. A small smile. Nathan built Harlow's, so there would always be a place like that. A place I could come and feel close to him. Zara looked around the restaurant, at the warm light, the dark wood, the way the room held people without overwhelming them, and understood, suddenly, why it had always felt different from everywhere else she had worked. It had been built with love. You could feel it if you knew how to feel for it. She looked back at Nathan. "I didn't know," she said quietly. Most people don't," he said. "That's deliberate." A beat. "What you did today," Nathan said, "for my mother, I want you to know that I heard everything." From the moment she sat down. Zara shook her head slightly. "I was just doing my job." "No," Nathan said simply. "You were doing something harder than that. You were doing what was right when it was easier not to. When it cost you something." He held her gaze. "That's not the job description, that's character." Zara said nothing. There was a pressure behind her eyes that she was managing carefully. "Greg made the wrong call today," Nathan continued. "That's on me as much as him. The culture of a room starts at the top, and I should have been more present in mine." He paused. "But I want to talk about you, not about what happened, about what comes next." Zara looked at him steadily. "What do you mean?" Nathan leaned forward slightly, folded his hands on the tablecloth, and in the gesture, Zara caught something of Margaret. The same stillness, the same quality of attention that made you feel like the only person in the room. "I've been watching this floor for 3 years," he said. "Longer than most people realize. The way a room runs, the way guests feel when they leave, it tells you everything about the people managing it. And for 3 years, this floor has run the way it does in large part because of you." Zara opened her mouth. "Don't argue with me," Nathan said. And there was a warmth in it, a quiet humor that surprised her enough to close her mouth again. Margaret made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "I have been looking," Nathan said, "for a general manager for this restaurant for 8 months. Someone who understands not just the operational side, the logistics, the staffing, the numbers, but the soul of a room. What it means to make people feel genuinely welcome. All people." He looked at her. "Every time I interview candidates, I find myself thinking, they're technically qualified, but they don't have it. The thing that can't be taught." He paused. "You have it," he said. "You've had it since the day you walked in here." The dining room continued its gentle hum around them. Zara sat very still. "I'm offering you the position of general manager of Harlow's," Nathan said. "Full salary, benefits, equity stake in the restaurant's annual performance. You would run this floor, hire your own team, set the standard." He sat back. "The standard you already set anyway," he added quietly. "Every single shift." Zara looked down at the white tablecloth for a moment. She thought about her mother. Double shifts, hospital laundry, never a complaint. Her father, early mornings, late nights, never a missed moment. The suitcase she had arrived in New York with at 26. The 3 years of this floor, this light, this room that had felt like home from the first day. She thought about the sidewalk outside where she had stood 20 minutes ago, in the November cold, trying to decide whether to cry. She looked up. First at Margaret. who was watching her with those warm, patient eyes and who gave her the smallest, most certain nod Zara had ever seen. Then at Nathan. Yes, Zara said. Diana Mercer had not left the table, not because she was comfortable, she was the furthest thing from comfortable, but because leaving felt, in some way she couldn't entirely articulate, like an admission, like the final confirmation of a loss she was still trying to negotiate her way out of. She had watched Nathan Cole cross the dining room, watched him sit with his mother and the waitress, watched the conversation unfold. She couldn't hear the words, but the body language was its own language, clear enough to read from across the room. Something was being offered. Something was being accepted. And whatever it was, Diana understood with a sinking, cellular certainty that it was moving the world of this room in a direction that had no place for her in it. Priya touched her arm gently. Diana? Maybe we should? I know, Diana said. She reached for her bag. Began to gather herself. Coat, phone, the careful reconstruction of composure that she was going to need to hold together until she was somewhere private enough to let it fall apart. She was almost ready to stand when a shadow fell across the table. She looked up. Nathan Cole was standing there, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with that same quiet, total calm he had brought to every moment of this afternoon. Miss Mercer, he said. Diana straightened. Mr. Cole, I want to say again, I am truly. I know, he said. I heard you the first time. A beat. I want to say one more thing to you, he continued. Not as the owner of this restaurant, just as a person. Diana waited. My mother grew up with very little, Nathan said. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school. She wore the same coat for 11 winters because she was saving everything she had for my future. She has never, not once in her life, allowed what she owned to determine how she carried herself. He looked at Diana steadily. The cardigan she wore today is worth more than anything on this table, he said. I hope someday you get to understand why. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked back toward his mother's table. Diana sat for a long moment after he left. Then she stood, quietly, put on her fur coat, picked up her designer bag, and walked out of Harlow's without saying another word. Outside on Madison Avenue, the November air was sharp and clean. Diana stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the noise of the city moving around her, taxis and foot traffic and the ordinary business of a Tuesday afternoon, and felt, in the particular silence inside all that noise, the full weight of what had just happened. 4 months of emails, 2 phone calls, 1 industry event. Every calculated move aimed at one meeting with one man, and she had walked into his restaurant, sat at his table, mocked his mother, and destroyed it all before the appetizers arrived. She had gone in looking for a deal. She had come out with a lesson. Whether she was ready to learn it was another question entirely. The rest of that Tuesday lunch service at Harlow's passed the way good service always passes, smoothly, warmly, invisibly. Zara tied her apron back on. She moved through the room the way she always had, precise, present, unhurried, except that now something had settled in her that hadn't been there before. Not pride, exactly. Something quieter than pride. The particular peace of a person who did the right thing, paid a price for it, and discovered that the price was worth every cent. Margaret stayed for 2 more hours. She had the roasted salmon. James always ordered the salmon, she told Zara when she brought it out, and a pot of Earl Grey, and a slice of the lemon tart that Harlow's pastry chef had been making the same way for a decade. She ate alone, contentedly, the way a woman eats when she is somewhere she loves and knows she is welcome. Before she left, she beckoned Zara to the table one last time. Zara came and crouched beside the chair, bringing herself level with the old woman. The way she had learned long ago was the right way to speak to someone seated, so they never had to look up at you. Margaret reached into the worn leather handbag, the one James had given her 40 years ago, the one she had carried every day since, and produced an envelope. She held it out to Zara. I want you to have this, she said. Zara shook her head gently. Mrs. Cole, please, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, Margaret said. That's rather the point. She pressed the envelope into Zara's hand with the quiet firmness of a woman who had made up her mind considerably earlier in the afternoon and was not open to negotiation. You didn't defend me because you knew who I was, Margaret said softly. You defended me because it was right, That is rarer than you know, dear, and it deserves to be honored. Zara looked at the envelope in her hand. There's something else in there, Margaret added, with the smallest, most private smile. A note from me to you, for the days, and there will be days, when doing the right thing costs more than you feel you can afford. She patted Zara's hand once, stood, slowly, steadily, with the unhurried dignity she had carried all afternoon, picked up her worn leather bag, and walked toward the exit with the straight-backed, quiet grace of a woman who had always known exactly who she was and had never once needed a room full of people to confirm it. At the door, she paused, turned back one final time. The dining room of Harlow's spread out before her, the warm light, the white tablecloths, the quiet industry of a room doing what it was built to do, making people feel, for the length of a meal, that they were somewhere that wanted them. James would have loved it today, she thought. He always did. She walked out into the November afternoon. That evening, alone in her apartment, Zara opened the envelope. Inside was a check, generous, specific, the kind of amount that solved the problems a person accumulates when they spend 3 years doing good work for someone else's dream instead of their own. And beneath the check, folded once, was a note card. Margaret's handwriting, careful, old-fashioned, the loops and curves of a woman who had learned to write when writing was still treated as something worth doing well. It said, "The world will not always reward you in the moment for doing what is right. Sometimes it will cost you your shift, your composure, your certainty that goodness is worth it. On those days, remember today. Remember that you stood up in a room full of people who looked away. That is not a small thing. That is everything." Zara read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it somewhere she would always be able to find it. 3 weeks later, Zara Collins began her first day as general manager of Harlow's. She arrived early, before the kitchen staff, before the prep team, before anyone, stood alone in the empty dining room in the quiet morning light, looked at the tables she had set 1,000 times, the floor she had walked 1,000 more. Then she tied on her apron, the manager's version now, different cut, same purpose, and began to set the room for the day. The way her mother had taught her. The way this place deserved. 6 months later, Diana Mercer sent a letter to Nathan Cole's office. Not a business proposal. Not a partnership deck. Just a letter. She wrote that she had thought about that afternoon many times since it happened. That she had started to notice, really notice, the people who served her in restaurants, in hotels, in the ordinary daily transactions she had moved through for years without looking. That she was trying to do better. That she wasn't sure she was succeeding, but that she was trying. Nathan read the letter once, set it on his desk. Then he wrote back. 2 sentences. "Thank you for writing. Trying is where it starts." If this story moves something in you, if you've ever been Zara, standing in a room full of people who looked away and choosing to speak anyway, share this video right now. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in her place? And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Because every week, we tell the stories of the people who do the right thing when nobody's watching. And sometimes, just sometimes, the right person is watching after all.